Number 1.
About 3 years ago, my cousin Mike and I were dropping off his girlfriend and her friend after seeing a movie. It was about 11 o'clock and we were going down this long gravel road that stemmed off another back county road. The long gravel road was about 2 miles long and it led directly to his girlfriend's house. It was basically her driveway. After dropping them off and heading back up the driveway, we saw something off the side of the road about 100 yards or so away. At first, we just figured it was some sort of an animal, so we flashed the brights on and off to scare it away. Once we got closer, maybe 20 yards away, we realized this wasn't anything we had ever seen before. Whatever it was stood up. Its back was massive and hunched over, and its legs were very skinny. When it looked at us, its eyes glowed in the headlights. Scared to death, I just looked down. I did not want to look at this thing. I was way too terrified. My cousin and I both sat there, panicking. Do we turn the headlights off? What if we lose sight of it? Do we just turn the car off and let this thing walk away? What if there's another one, and we can't start the car and get away fast enough? Do we hit it and keep driving? And what if we don't kill it, and it sits on the hood and tries to get into the car? We both sat there in terror. I continued to watch it at the top of my eyes. There was no way that I was going to look directly at this, or if there's another one, I don't want to see it either. All I could really see of it was its skinny, dog-like legs and its massive upper body. It stood there for a second and then just walked into the woods, on 2 legs. Up until a while ago when I told people about it, I told him that the only thing I remembered was the way its eyes shined back, its large hunched over back and its skinny dog-like legs. When my cousin and I talked about it, we just tried to conclude that maybe it was a deformed bear or something. We had never heard of the Michigan Dogman before. The part where this story gets weird is when I was talking to my friends back at home just a few weeks ago. We were trying to get together a ghost hunting trip for when I came back home on leave from San Diego with the Marines. I was online searching for Michigan hauntings and Michigan paranormal activity, and I came across this story titled Michigan Dogman. The police reports, the witness accounts, the drawings, everything matched perfectly. It was crazy to me that other people had seen what I saw that night. It had been about 3 years since then, and it was insane that just now I'm finding such a perfect explanation.
Number 2.
One oddly silenced night, I was hanging out with a group of my friends in northwest Michigan. We usually hang out every weekend and do things that get the adrenaline pumping. Everything from launching fireworks at personal property to invading so-called haunted graveyards at midnight with only the light of the full moon. My friends and I are an odd bunch of kids who have been best friends since back in the good old days of elementary school. That night bonded us through fear and horror of what all but one of us experienced. We live in the small county of Goldstream, which is flat farmland with swamp-like areas. We were cruising along the road when we pulled into the parking lot of a church undergoing construction. There were traffic cones signaling the areas undergoing work that we decided to take just for the hell of it. My friend Alex took 5 in his car and I took 5 in mine. Our plan was to go just outside the county where it was desolate and mess with traffic with the cones we had acquired. And on the drive there, we noticed that all of the cows in one pen were huddled over in the corner, as if hiding from something, but we thought nothing of it. Upon reaching our destination, we heard a far-off howl, but because we were the adventurous types, we shrugged it off thinking it was just a common timber wolf. The fog was very thick at this time of night, around midnight I would say, and drivers would only be able to see a few feet in front of them and would not be able to avoid any cones out in the road. What a terribly clever idea, I thought to myself, as I set a few in the road about 15 yards from each other. After the very second that I had set the last cone down, we heard the howling again, but this time it received our full attention. This was mainly because it seemed a lot closer this time. My friend Cody kept insisting that we should leave and that it would be in our best interest not to have to deal with whatever was howling, but our attention was drawn away from the howling as we heard a car approach the area of road with the traffic cones. After a few seconds of listening, we heard the car come to a screeching halt as it hit a cone. Knowing that we were in big trouble, we ran further into this swampy section of land. We then heard footsteps on the road and the rough sound of an older gentleman say,
"Damn, kid."
This is when it got bad. We knew the old man had left, but we could continue to hear footsteps. These were much heavier and behind us. Cody said to make a run for it, but I must have confused run to the car with find a new hiding spot. As all my friends except for a boy named Mark took a right, I took a left. I came to the edge of a murky pond where I heard something large splashing the water out just beyond the visibility levels of the fog. At this point, I had no doubt that I was dealing with the Dogman of Michigan, and I was trembling as though I was in an earthquake. Mike and I had curiosity get the best of us, and we leaned forward a bit to have a look. The dim outline of an extremely large man came into view, but this was no man. The yellow eyes were staring me down as I examined the rest of it. I heard a small yelp, and Mike had made a run for it, but I stood still, frozen with fear. The beast was extremely hairy with a snout and fangs large enough to bite clean through a man my size. I was fairly skinny and 6 foot tall. The one thing that really hooked me was that it was a bipedal animal, standing on 2 feet. The beast's yellow eyes continued to stare me down, and I noticed that it began to move in my direction. I then heard yells of my name. I was relieved that my friends had not left without me, but more alarmed at the beast slowly making its way towards me. I ran like a Kenyan marathon runner towards the sound of the voices, and I could hear the large splash of the beast exiting the water in my direction. I reached my car, and everyone was relieved to see me in one piece. We jumped it into the car and I gunned it down the road, and just as we got moving, this 7-foot monster got to the side of the road and clawed my car. Then it let out the most blood-curdling howl I can ever imagine. The worst part was that I heard a return howl in the direction I was heading. Alex's car was in front of me, and I saw it stop and drift around in the opposite direction of me, and I did the same when I saw a similar beast ahead of me. As we drove past the spot where the first one clawed my car, I saw the beast standing, just watching as we passed by. It has been 4 years since we encountered this thing, and I have not gone through one whole night without having a nightmare about the events that took place that day. We joke about it occasionally, but we mainly keep our thoughts to ourselves. Since that first encounter, I have heard a similar howl many times, and I know what lies in the woods of Michigan in Goldstream County.
Number 3.
It was me and my buddy, and we were in Roscommon, Michigan. We were on our way out into the woods for our evening hunt. The hunt went well. We saw the normal 2 or 3 deer, but we couldn't get a shot, so we left a little early because we were irritated. We put our stuff in the back of the truck. My buddy then heard rustling in the woods behind us, so we both got our flashlights out of the truck, and when we shined our light into the brush, we saw 2 huge red glowing eyes about 7 feet up off the ground, and all we could see was a massive dog's foot sticking out of the brush, so we ran to the truck in fear. When the lights turned on, we saw a dog that stood upright, about 7 feet tall, and we started driving away. We never saw it again, and it had to be the scariest experience of our lives.
Number 4.
When I was hiking in Ausable in the summer of 1999 in the counties of Skoda, Alcona and Iosco, I remember one of my most scariest encounters with the wilderness. While walking east down along the river around 1 hour prior to dusk, I heard what to my ears was a wolf howl. I have seen wolf prints and have seen wolves around my house, but never have I heard a howl so deep and almost human-like in my life. I got spooked and set up camp and made a fire, larger than most due to my fear. At dusk, I heard it closer, directly across the river. I have heard stories of the Wolfman from native stories and in family folklore covering the whole USA, but never have I personally seen what I saw that night or the next day. That night, after eating beef barley stew from my canned good collection, I laid down by the fire with my huge folding knife closely gripped by my chest. I was watching and listening to the surrounding woodline for about 30 minutes, when the average noises stopped, which to me meant two things. 1. Something had spooked the local animals, and 2. It made me very uneasy. I looked away from the fire and shot the fire away from my eyes using the unarmed hand. I looked across the river, which was only about 100 meters across from my fire, and saw the most unnerving sight ever. On the sand was a creature standing maybe larger than the average so black bear, with black fur, large long skull, and yellow reflecting eyes like the wolf. I closed my eyes and hoped I was imagining things, and then it gave out the howl again. I opened my eyes and it ran up the bank and disappeared into the night. As it ran, it didn't run on all fours like a bear, nor a wolf. And unlike the local Bigfoot, it wasn't full upright like a human or primate. I was so scared that I slept the rest of that night in a damn tree, about 20 foot off the ground. It took me 3 hours and praying to ease my fear so I could sleep. The next morning, I woke up and crossed downstream and hiked back to where I saw the werewolf or dogman. There, in the bank, I saw wolf prints about the size of a bear and adult's paw. There weren't any group of fours like if you were tracking a wolf or coyote. On the other hand was a line of tracks separated by at least a yard apart between each paw print, and the paw print, unlike that of a canine, was not straightly imprinted onto the sand. The print was angled onto the sand as if it were balancing around 200 pounds of body weight on that single paw. I wish I had a camera with flashlight that night prior or for that day to capture some proof of what I saw. As a child, my friend and I were living in Macomb County in Memphis, Michigan. While hiking in the Memphis Youth Center farmland in Richmond Town, we saw a similar set of tracks. A few years prior, in 1996, we also tracked it 4 miles to a farm where a lady had found her chicken pen torn to shreds and many chickens shredded. None of us ever mentioned these before for fear of being called crazy.
Number 5.
I recently recalled an experience from my childhood that had been repressed in my mind since I was about 4 or 5 years old. As a child, I grew up a 20-acre lot just on the outskirts of Cadillac. At that time, there was more tree coverage and fewer industrial sites in the area. We were mostly surrounded by woods. One early summer morning, I had gotten up before dawn to watch my dad get ready to go off to work. Some mornings, he'd get up at 3:30 to 4:30 AM to start his days. Me and my mum would get up and send him on his way, daily routine back then. He'd always put on his work pants and work shirts over his regular clothes and proceed to go out to his truck and load his equipment for the day. In the darkness, his work clothes looked really shaggy. The morning of my encounter, I had gone up a little earlier than usual and was very groggy. I stumbled in the large plate glass window and saw something rummaging in the truck's bed over the side of the truck. I assumed it was Dad, so I banged on the window to get his attention and wave. I was chilled to the bone by what appeared back at me. A creature that stood on 2 feet, but for the life of me had the head of a dog, canine-like, yet somehow human. We locked eyes for what seemed to be an eternity. Strangely enough though, the eyes were not yellow as everyone else seems to see. They were a pale yellowy green colour. I finally mustered a scream and fell backwards off the couch in front of the window. As I was falling backwards, the creature had already hit all fours and was lunging for the window. He started at a good 20 feet away at the truck's back end. My scream had gotten my dad out of the bathroom and into the living room, yelling to my mum to hush me up. He looked out the window and asked me what I saw, but I was just sobbing. He went to the front door and turned on the porch light and found nothing. Annoyed that his morning was off to a not so quiet start, he made my mother take me back to bed and he left for the day. I was so traumatized by this experience I repressed it for all these years. It took looking up the Dogman and studying cryptozoology to kick the memory loose again. The house where this took place still stands, but the tree coverage that was abundant as a child is history. Whatever the thing is, I'm sure he's still out there waiting.
Hey guys, it's the Grim Reader here. I really hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please drop a like, subscribe, share, drop a comment in the comment section below as well, and I might reply to you. As usual, check out my other videos and see if they're any good. And until the next video, have a wonderful time and stay safe.